Okay, so let's come back now to the Torah reading, this challenging reading in which we simply read about the offerings, and most especially the Shlamim offerings, which is where our Torah reading began on page 617 with verse 11 for those who want to look at it. Shlamim is peace or wholeness, shalom, shalem. And so the question is, what is the connection here with these offerings and peace? So to get at this question, we have to note that the Shlamim offerings are unique among the offerings in a variety of ways. Our Torah reading recounts 5 different kinds of offerings that Bnei Yisrael can bring. There are linguistic differences between this one and all the rest, right? It's a little bit like Manish Tanah Hazeh, right? Manish Tanah Korban Hazeh. What's different about this offering? With all the other offerings, the language is Zot Torat Ha'olah, Zot Torat HaMincha, Zot Torat HaChatat, Zot Torat HaAsham. With this one, it's Zot Torat Zevach HaShlamim. Right, everything else this is the law of the Olah, of the Mincha, of the Chatat. Here, this is the law of the Shlamim offering. That's the first differential. The second thing that's different is that only with this offering does the Torah go on to add, Asher Yakriv Ladonai. This is the law of the Shlamim offering that one will bring to God. Doesn't say that anywhere else. Okay, so that's the first thing. We'll come back especially to that latter thing. The second way in which this is distinct is procedural differences. Only with the Shlamim offering does the Torah say, Yadav Tevi'ena, the one bringing the offering, hands shall bring it. Meaning, the owner actually participates in the making of the offering without an intermediary. With every other offering, the owner kind of brings the animal and everything is done by the Kohen. Here, there is a role for the actual owner of the offering, and here's one interpretation of that. This is the Kliyakar. He says, there's only regard to the peace offering that the Torah states that the owner shall bring it with their own hands. If a king's subject wishes to appease the king, the sovereign, one sends a gift through an emissary, as Jacob did in trying to appease Esau, right? Jacob sent messengers. But one who brings the king a gift as a token of respect does so personally, with their own hands. This is the difference between all the other offerings, which relate in some way to a sin or an omission, something offensive, and this offering, which is just a gift. Okay, so that's the difference, right? This offering has nothing to do with wanting to appease. This is just to honor and give respect and thanks to the king. And so we bring it with our own hands and we don't need an intermediary. The other thing procedurally is with all the other offerings are either burnt in their entirety on the Mizbeach, on the altar, or partly burnt on the Mizbeach and partly eaten by the Kohen. The Shlamim offering is consumed in large part by the offerer. It's the only one. And so we get, this is in the Midrash Tanchuma, all other offerings, the owner receives nothing. It's either all consumed on the altar or partly the altar and partly the Kohen. But with the Todah offering, the gratitude offering, which is a subset of the Shlamim offering, the blood and limbs are offered on the altar, the breast and thigh bone are given to the Kohanim, and the skin and the meat is given to the owner to eat. Thus, this offering promotes peace among the altar, the Kohanim, and Yisrael. Right? Now that may mean peace, shlamim, in the sense of like payment back, like everyone benefits. It may also be a kind of counter to the resentment that people may feel bringing all these offerings to feed the Kohanim and getting nothing back, right? Here, everyone participates. And there's another way in which this aspect of everyone eating brings peace. And here, I want to really note that the Pesach offering, what we are doing at the Seder in remembrance of the Pesach offering that was made, the Pesach offering is a kind of shlamim offering. It's a todah offering. It's a special kind. There's no leavened bread with it, as there is here, but it is a subset of this. So it turns out that a todah offering is a lot of food. It's a lot, right? All of the meat and skin is given to the owner to eat. It might be a whole cow or a sheep. That's a lot of food. And there's 4 varieties of bread that have to be offered. 3 kinds unleavened, loaves, wafers, and scalded, and leavened bread, loaves of bread. 10 loaves of each kind, of which 1 of each goes to the Kohen, and 9 of each is given to the owner to eat. That's a lot of bread, right? That's 27 pieces of, loaves of matzah of one kind or another, and 9 loaves of leavened bread with all the meat. And as with the Pesach offering, none of it can be left over till morning. It has to be eaten that day and night. You can't have any leftovers. It's a lot of food, right? So here's one explanation of that. This is the Abravano, of how that brings peace, and it's related to the Pesach Seder. The purpose of this law of the peace offering is to publicize the miracle, and seeing that the owner has only 1 day and night for consuming the sacrifice, the owner invites relatives and friends to share the meal and the joy. On being asked what motivated this big feast, the host will recount divine wonders. But if the time for consuming Thanksgiving peace offerings were 2 days and a night, as for the other kinds, the owner would not invite anyone. For in one house it shall be eaten, this is the Pesach offering, in 2 days and 1 night. Having an abundance of meat and bread in the house and only 1 day and 1 night in which to eat it, he will certainly invite many friends to share it, lest they despise him the next morning when they see him burning large quantities of the residue of his offering. Right? This is really amazing. Like, one way that this brings peace is that you have too much food to eat. You have to eat it in one house and you have to eat it in 1 day. And that means you have to share. You have to share. You have to invite people. And that brings peace because you're sharing food. And in the process of sharing food, you're sharing the good that you have experienced. You're sharing a sense of blessing, a sense of joy, a sense of gratitude with other people for what has happened to you, and you're feeding them in the process. And the worst would be if you keep it to yourself, and then you go out in the street and you burn it the next morning because you can't eat it, and everybody says, what the hell, you're burning all this food? Why didn't you share? No, you have to share. Right? Now, this is really an important piece of Pesach when you think about our society that's so individualistic. We go out to a restaurant, we bring the leftovers home, and we eat them all week. We have a big meal, we put the leftovers in the refrigerator, and we eat by ourselves all week. Pesach says, no, don't hoard for yourself for tomorrow, share with other people today. Right? And that's what these shlamim offerings are about. But most importantly, how is the shlamim associated with peace? Why is it brought? All the other is the reason, right? The reason why it's brought. All the other offerings have a quality of atonement, and they are required. The shlamim has no reference to sin or an omission of any kind, and it is voluntary. The reason you bring a shlamim offering is either because you made an oath to do it, or you're volunteering it, or most often, and this is what the focus is here, is the todah offering, the gratitude offering. It's because you have been spared from something that caused your well-being to come into question. Or the echo of this in our liturgy is the Gomel blessing. If you were in a car accident, if you had major surgery that could have been life-threatening, if something happened and you survived an earthquake, you do the Gomel blessing. It's the echo of the Todah offering, where you have to give gratitude because something called your shlemut, your sense of wholeness and well-being in the world, into question. You were spared, you survived, and in response for experiencing that miracle, you offer this blessing. Now, here, I want to go beyond the question of the miracle. And I want to suggest that the shlamim offerings actually speak to one of the most challenging things in life, or maybe it's just something I'm really struggling with in the last year. And here I want to rely on the Netivot Shalom, the great Hasidic commentator of the 20th century, and he quotes the Zohar as saying, God says that the shlamim offerings are dearer and more beloved to God than any other offering because they bring peace above and below, or between above and below. And the Netivot Shalom also quotes the early Midrash in the Tanchuma. God says this blessing is more beloved than all the other korbanot because they bring peace between Israel and Avinu Shebashamayim, the divine parent, between peace and God, between Israel and God. Somehow, these offerings, even though they are not about sin, bring peace between human beings and God. And the Netivot Shalom focuses on the difference between when one who stands before the king as a servant, doing what one is directed to do, and one who stands before the king as a child, right? As a prince, so to speak, in which one does what will please the parent and make the parent proud. You want to give nachas to your parents. That's the language, nachat ruach. You want to give them joy, right? It's from the Rosh Hashanah liturgy. We have that. Im kavadim, im kavanim, whether we stand as servants or as children. And he notes, the Netivot Shalom, that the shlamim is when we want to give pleasure because we're children, and that's why the owner eats of it, because a servant doesn't sit at the master's table. Children, family, sit at the king's table. So we eat, we partake with God. But what does it really mean, shalom, between Israel and God, between above and below? Is it only in the context when the miracle comes? Or at least the miracle in the context, the miracle that we want, that we're waiting for, what we have defined as the escape, the cure, the victory, the peace treaty, the salvation. I want to suggest that many of the things that challenge our sense of shlemut, our sense of well-being, of being whole, of being okay, don't resolve, right? There isn't always the miracle, in part because some of those things, I think the most challenging things, or many of the most challenging things, aren't resolvable. And the idea here is, can there be a return to wholeness that isn't about an external miracle, but a coming to terms, a reconciliation, our finding a way to experience wholeness, or at least well-being, within the experience of brokenness. Whether we're talking about the intractability of evil in the world, right? Even when we're saved from one thing, there's another threat, right? This war may end, another one is ongoing, another one is going to start, right? There's, we're spared from some natural disaster, another one happens somewhere else. Like, it's always there. There is no sense of ongoing safety in the world. Or we're talking about aging and confronting our own mortality and chronic illness, or the loss of function as we get older, right? There's no resolution to that. The things that don't go away. And I'm not talking about denial in the finding of shlemut, that's not it at all, but an ability to find joy, an ability to find a sense that I'm still okay, right? I'm still in some way, I have some integrity and sense of wholeness in my life and my being, even as I'm confronting brokenness. And it's why I read that passage that we put on the page with the prayer for healing on page 173, right? The gift is to be able to deal with what is and feel a sense in some way of wholeness and peace. It's exactly what this is talking about. That I'm no longer tortured by the fact that I am aging. I find the joy in it. I want to commend to you, there's Annie Lamott, the writer, has been writing a wonderful series in the Washington Post about her own sort of struggle to come to terms with aging and the way that she finds joy in that process and the kind of coming to terms with what's different about her body. I think it is something every human being struggles. I will share with you that last week I asked Sheila, given her decades and decades of experience as a therapist, did she ever see anyone who handled it well? I was really asking, like, does anyone handle it better than I am? Because I'm struggling with this, and I kind of want to know, like, are there people who just, like, for whom this is kind of easy? And her answer was, it's very hard. Like, she kind of never saw anyone who just dealt with it well, right? It's a process of coming to terms. And I want to say, this process of the shlamim is so much the move from Purim to Pesach. Purim, as I teach every year, is the container for our anger and the objection that we lodge at evil in the world, at our vulnerability to being hurt or killed randomly. That's what the book of Esther is about, right? The specter of evil arising randomly. And how do we live in that world? Like, how do we hear that someone young was hit by a truck and killed? How do we deal with friends who are suddenly, right, lying in a hospital bed? How do we deal with our own sense of vulnerability? How do we deal with the rise of anti-Semitism again, right? And the threats that seem to come out of nowhere randomly. Purim is the place where we say, no, God, I'm not going to just worship you and be all good and this is fine. Like, no, this is not okay. Not okay. Right? The randomness, the evil in the world, like, where are you? What kind of God are you? Right? I lodge my objection. And then we start cleaning the house for Pesach. Right? And we say, you know what? Okay. This is the world, right? And maybe God isn't going to come in and fix it. But I want to be close to God. And I want to be close to the people I love. And I'm going to struggle to come to accept my own limitations, just as I accept the limitations of the people I love, the compromises I make for the joys of being in relationship with all the imperfect, limited people that I love, just as I'm imperfect and limited. And similarly, I'm going to come to terms with and make peace between above and below, between the ideal and the reality, between the perfection that I long for and the this world goodness that I can have, and between my fantasy of a God who's just going to make everything right and the God that I can have access to, who isn't going to fix everything, but will be there with me. And in that coming to terms, maybe I can find shlemut. I can find wholeness. I can find a sense of inner peace. And when that comes, what a blessing. And then I want to say thank you for this moment of feeling okay, for this moment of feeling even good, for the return of joy when I thought it would never come, right? I want to bring just one little piece more in, and then I want to stop. And I'm aware that I'm treading in water that Rabbi Boyno is an expert swimmer in, and I'm wading in, which is partly about how we deal with trauma. So if there are thoughts that you want to jump in, please do. I want to bring in one other kind of offering that I left out when I talked about the offerings. And I left it out because it's not an offering that Bnei Yisrael make. It's the offering of the Kohen Gadol, Aaron, on his inauguration. And in the course of the parsha of Parshat Tzav, it talks about the inauguration offering of the Kohen Gadol. It's not given a name. It just says the offering he makes on the day he's inaugurated, but it has an echo or anticipates the Shlamim offering, because it is the only other offering that also says Asher Yakrivu Ladonai, that he will make to God, just like the Shlamim. And what's very striking is that in the list of the offerings, in the parsha, when it goes through one by one, right, and describes them, they're given in this order: Olah, Mincha, inauguration, Chatat, Asham, Shlamim, right? But then, at the very end of the chapter, there's a recap of all the offerings. And very strikingly, the order is changed. And the inauguration offering is given a name that it didn't have before. At the end, the order is Olah, Mincha, Chatat, Asham, Miluim, Shlamim. What happens is that inauguration offering is linked, coupled at the end with the Shlamim. And it's given this name, Miluim, which literally means for our fillings. It comes from the inauguration ritual in which the Kohen's hands are filled literally with grain and symbolically, meaning the Kohen is given a sacred task. He is inaugurated as the Kohen Gadol. And I want to suggest that there is a connection between that experience and the experience of wholeness, of shalom, of peace, that we can make for ourselves in all the brokenness of our lives. Because we too are each given a sacred task. And when we claim it, and when we feel it, our hands and our souls become filled We are no longer empty. We have a mission. And I want to suggest that that mission and meaning and the call to service makes us less empty and more filled, and is precisely the thing that enables us to find wholeness, even in all the ways that we are broken. One day I will die, but right now I have a sacred task. And my mortality does not in any way undermine the sacredness of the ways in which my hands are filled now. I am aging, and in that process, I'm losing abilities I once had. And I have a sacred task. And I am not in any way losing my ability to complete whatever my task is in each and every day, because I was created to do it. And so whatever I'm able to do, that's what I'm meant to do. Even if it's spending a day, or in my case, almost a year, replenishing myself so that I can do more when I can, right? This is the path to making meaning and feeling whole. And it's intertwined with the todah, with gratitude, in a kind of, again, virtuous cycle, right? I feel a sense of mission. And so I feel a little bit more whole. And then I find gratitude. And when I find gratitude, I'm more open to feeling a sense of mission, and I feel more whole. And this, I want to suggest, is what we need to share with each other, is this process. We need to make it visible for each other. We need to be the one, coming back to the maftir, to help each other come back, to help each other revitalize in this really difficult time.